Good morning, everyone. We are now heading over to our final assessment for this semester. Hoping you're gonna do well coming out of our F3 assessment. Yes, I'd like to first commend you about by your on your S3 assignment. You've made your essay. You showed that you know your documentary mode and you know how you're gonna execute your documentary using this mode that we have chosen to produce the documentary on. So now you have a different setup now. So you are not going to use the same documentary mode that you used on your last assessment. So on this assignment now, you are going to use a different documentary mode. But now your task is to find a photograph that was taken. I think I'll have to get back to the brief and see the year when this photograph was taken. But it can be any photograph that you can lay your hands on. You can get it maybe from the internet, but getting it from the internet, that will be quite a challenge because you need to find the person that is on the photograph. And also you need to find the person who took the photograph, either of the two. And if you're lucky, get both. But if you get a photograph that you can access maybe in your family photo album, then it might work in your favor because you might be able to get a hold of that person because he or she might be a family member, or perhaps in your friend's photo album you can get a photo. Yeah, there are so many places that you can acquire this photograph, but I think the best thing is to get a photograph of a person that you can have access to, and a person that will be easy for you to do some research about, so that you can be able to structure a documentary accordingly with the facts that you have gathered in your interviews. Yeah. Yes. I said interview. Yes, interview. During your research, you also do interviews, perhaps with people acquainted with the person on the photograph. And also you do an interview with the people, with the person who took the photograph. It will be advisable as well to perhaps that the preliminary interview that you are going to do, it is advisable to say record that on video, record it on video. Have some questions that you think will be relevant for this documentary. And from that preliminary interview, you can also come up with follow-up questions. See, yeah. Something's happening here. Yeah, let's continue. Sorry about that. Yeah, so it means you'll be doing this preliminary interview, and also this preliminary interview will be laying a foundation for the interview that you are going to finally put in your documentary. Yeah, perhaps you might also find that you need some questions or some answers in your preliminary interview that you are going to add into your this thing, your final photograph. So here, folks, I have some videos that I would like to share with you. Videos that have been done by what's it? Videos that have been done by professional filmmakers in this industry, and we can learn from them how to do an interview properly, to do an interview properly, and then because I'm expecting you guys to nail this one. Yeah, you did well on your last assignment, but I was not entirely sold. Okay, yeah. So let's this one. This one is from Mark Paul.
This is going to be a quick masterclass on documentary interviews. I've done quite a few of these videos in the past, but what's unique about this one, besides that this is the best information possible, I hope, is that we have a PDF down below that will give you a starting place for your questions. It's a guide for you to know where to start so that you don't get stuck recording interviews that aren't really helping your film, because there's nothing worse than when you come back to the interview and you look at it and say, well, this ain't helping. First tip is get someone taking notes, if possible. There's a great website, not sponsored by them, editingtools.io/live tools, free website. You can go in there and take notes during your interview so that you can then export out an XML and send it to your editor or yourself so that you just know the good parts of your interview. It's a great tool to have even when you're just shooting B-roll on set. Next step is know the power of what. You can actually get some pretty underwhelming questions when you just ask someone, what happened on this day? But if you just change what you're asking for with the word what, you can get much more interesting questions like, what was going through your head? What were you feeling in that precise moment? What are your goals? What do you think will happen if you don't reach your goal? Using that what question to get people thinking about their emotions and their goals and what they're actually feeling will get you much more interesting questions. My next point is know the difference between emotion and information questions. I've mentioned this many times on this channel, but I still see people making this mistake in their interviews where they ask just information questions, getting people to talk about what happened, where they were, how old they were, all the minutiae and details of those said events or their expertise, but forgetting to ask them about the emotions. What was that like for you? How would you describe what that time was like for you personally? What was your family feeling? What were you feeling? What were you thinking? What were you thinking? You can actually just go through your list of questions and write E or I, emotion or information. If you have a lot of I's beside your questions, it might be time to ask some more emotive questions. The next point is practice flow for an interview. I've said this before, write your questions and throw them out. You don't need to throw them out, but have them as a reference, but flow your questions together. This is the power of listening. I think the biggest mistake for most people in interviews is that they're not actually listening to what people are saying. We had Ben Proudfoot on one of our AOD calls. Every month we bring in experts from around the industry for the Art of Documentary Academy. Ben Proudfoot has won 2 Academy Awards, and he's an incredible interviewer. You look at his film, The Last Repair Shop, and he actually doesn't go off of a notepad. He will just get into his interviews. Sometimes they take 8 hours. He just did an interview that took 3 days. So that's pretty big. But for you, you might just have an hour with someone. But that's still okay for you to just get into a flow. And what I mean by that is don't just be looking at each question and looking back up. That's just not how conversations go in real life. And you want people to forget that they're being interviewed. So listen to them. Rather than sometimes just having a list of questions, know that a list of plot points in that person's life or a list of ideas you'd like them to talk about. So if you're asking an athlete about when was the first time you played basketball and they say, oh, I think I was a kid when I was 7 years old. Don't look down to your notes and come up with the next question. Ask them, what was that moment like? Do you remember it? Do you remember the first time holding that ball? These will begin to get into themes, and then you're going to get into that flow. And this is when the best parts of the interview will come through, when someone forgets that they're being interviewed with a camera there. My next point is leave 10 minutes before your interview just to hang out with the person. Even if you've done a pre-interview, it's nice to let someone's nerves calm down. And don't talk about yourself. Ask lots of questions, even in this opening moment. I love just giving some space and time for my subjects to land. Like we just did this interview with Chris Williamson, and I've mentioned it. It's so hot outside. He came in, he had to take his shirt off. So we just hung around for 10 minutes and we chatted. And he's way more fit than me. So I was asking him about his exercise and about how his podcast is going. Get people forgetting that they're on a film set. Let them feel comfortable in that environment. If you listen to podcasts like Joe Rogan, he's always referencing back to conversations he had with the guest when they first arrived. It's very clear that he talks with them ahead of time before they ever sit down in the seat. So get interested in them, which leads me to my next point is research who your person is to death whether that's in pre-interviews or talking to their family or just getting into any information online about them so that the questions you ask will help them feel known. I've made this mistake so often where I'll go in just a bit arrogant into interviews and just think, well, I'm good at talking, I'm good at asking questions, I don't need to know a ton about this person. And I'll end up putting my foot in my mouth. I'll ask them questions or inquire about things that should be so obvious about their life, and it makes them feel like perhaps I don't know much about them. That's not a great feeling to have. I think the best person at this in the world is Nardwar. He does so much research ahead of time, and you'll see how he gets unique reactions out of guests like Questlove crying that he would never get out of anyone else.
Tams and like this dude right here is really doing research now. It's great.
So study your person. Take that extra hour or few hours the days ahead of time to get to know who they are. One of the key parts to me coming up with the questions for my films is also immersing myself in what I believe will be the cinematic universe of that actual film. And you've probably heard me mention this in the past on this channel, but listening to the right music helps me get into that mindset and begin to envision those scenes, pictures, and moments that will play out in the film. So coming up with some of my questions, one of my favorite things to do is to go into Music Bed. I either go to one of my playlists I have for the art of documentary or my personal one, or I go find their new music and make sure to categorize it by cinematic and instrumental so that I'm not distracted by any voices. And then this helps inform what I want to actually ask my character, what questions might provoke some of those scenes. And I've found that Music Bed has by far the best library for this. It's made by film composers. A lot of the music has been taken from films. So many of my documentaries have their music featured right on Music Bed, and I've worked with many of these composers. Music Bed even now has an AI tool where if there's a song that you like from a certain movie or genre or band, you can type that in and it'll suggest music that is similar to this. I put a link below down to a free trial for Music Bed and also a link to one of my playlists if you want to check out the music that I've been using lately. Check out Music Bed. Appreciate them for sponsoring this video. By the way, if you want to see the whole lighting breakdown and how we go about shooting more high-end interview setups, I did a breakdown of this interview we did with Chris Williamson, with DP Chris Bork. And a quick little mention to Art of Documentary. That's the course and academy that I helped co-found. It's an incredible community of thousands of filmmakers around the world. We have whole sections in our courses that talk about documentary interviews, about how to improve your storytelling, how to run your business better. But we're going to be reopening the doors really soon. Check out AOD. Put the link below if you're interested, or shoot me a DM if you want to find out more. Another point, never tell someone to be comfortable.
Come on, you want to know what's about to be like?
The second you tell someone, hey, just relax, be normal, when you're shooting B-roll or putting them in an interview setting, it's just a strange thing to ask because then people start getting in their head thinking, well, what is normal? Am I acting normal? And it puts pressure on them to feel like they just weren't acting normal. Get that out of your vocabulary. Your job is to create an environment that will help them feel relaxed and to talk to them and ask them questions to get their mind off the fact that they're being filmed or that there's any pressure in the interview. My last few points is always circle back to your first few questions at the end of the interview. This is a great way if people were a bit more reserved, a bit more tense at the beginning, to come back to those questions and ask them again, because by then they may give you more genuine, honest responses or actually rephrase them or reframe them in a way that you didn't have before. They'll be more relaxed. Bonus tip, never interrupt. Let someone finish their thought. Sometimes people like me, we need to just hear ourselves talk for us to actually sort out our thoughts. And perhaps you don't feel what they're saying is that important, but that is important for the person to actually sort out what they're thinking and feeling. And when you interrupt, you're telling them that's not important. Just be patient, let them get through that idea, and then ask them to maybe perhaps summarize what they just said. What is the key point? This will help you get truncated responses, which can be really helpful for the edit. And lastly, if you can, have someone else monitoring the questions that you wrote down so that you can stay focused and stay present in the interview. I love working with my producer, Tad, on the projects we've been working on recently. For the Chris Williamson interview, he was hiding behind the monitor. He had all the questions we've written out. We probably had 100 questions. We didn't have to ask all of them, but we had them connected to the themes that we were trying to find out for our film, because Chris was talking about a main character we're going to be working on. This whole interview we shot with Chris is for an upcoming documentary series we're working on. Having that script supervisor, having that writer, having that extra person in the room to help you is really, really helpful. So I recommend having one other person there on set who knows your story or at least is reviewing all your questions. Awesome. Thank you for watching this video. I hate goodbyes, but I love my whoop. I love finding out how much I slept last night. Actually, let's check. I'm not sponsored by Whoop. Nice. That is actually pretty good. I'll take it. 85% recovery. Maybe I should go for a run tonight. All right. See you guys on the next one.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, folks. That's the end of our video. As you have seen, you have had a Mike talking about the preliminary interview, as I've alluded at the beginning of the video. That is very crucial. And then the other thing that's very crucial is how do you set up your interview? How to make your space create. Say if you're going to a person's home and then you're going to interview them in the comfort of your home, how are you going to set up your gear, your camera, your lights, your sound gear, and everything? Or if say you want to invite them in the studio, if you so happen to have a studio or something, how you're going to set that one up. So I'm just gonna share another video that will inform you on how you go about doing that. So it will help you. Let me check this. Got it. This video here is going to show us how we're going to set up our interview in a very professional manner. This guy has done stuff for Netflix. So this is very beautiful video. Let's check it out.
Today I want to show you guys how to shoot cinematic professional interviews like you would see on HBO or Netflix. And we're going to use this interview that I shot for my docuseries Ball to Go. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Alex Arfati, and today we're going to be going over every aspect of this interview that I shot for my documentary. We're going to go over the location and what I look for in choosing my interview location, lighting, composition, and even how I organize my interview touches. So the first thing that I do is I grab my camera and I start to frame up different parts of the area to get an idea of what I want my interview location to be. Now, when I'm doing this, there are two things that I'm looking for when I choose my interview location. The first thing that I'm looking for is depth. I like to create as much depth and separation from the background as possible. And just a quick tip, guys, I highly suggest that you do your best to stay away from shooting something against the wall. The second thing that I'm looking for is a clean background that isn't too distracting from my subject. Now, that might mean that I might have to move some furniture around or clean up the area to make it look nice or to create some sort of symmetry with the furniture. But the overall idea is that you want your subject to be the main focus of this interview, not distracted by the background. Now, once I have my frame set, I set my camera on a tripod and I start to really hone in on the angle of my subject. The best angle for an interview always depends on style or mood that you're trying to create. Now, in this particular interview, our subject is a lawyer who's also a manager for the fighters that we're following. So for this interview, I wanted to shoot something a little bit more professional for my main camera angle. Typically for this camera angle, I like to shoot with a 24 or a 35 millimeter, and that's because I like to have a wide shot with a good amount of headroom and showcase the location that my character's in. For this shoot, I was using a Surrey 35 millimeter lens with a T2 aperture. And after I locked in my main master shot, it was then time for me to figure out what my second camera angle was going to be. One thing that I took into consideration when choosing the second camera angle was that there are moments of this interview that was going to draw out a lot of emotion from this character. And while we wanted to keep the main angle a little bit more professional, this second angle really needed to capture the emotion and the vulnerability on our subject's face. And to do this, we angled the camera a little bit higher, and then the composition we chose was to put her in the third frame. Now, stylistically, we chose to have the camera angle point down at her because by being a really tight shot and pointed down, it starts to make your character feel a little bit small and like the walls are closing in on them. This camera angle that we chose was very intentional to deliver a certain feeling from our interview questions in our film. After we established both camera angles, it was then to start setting up the lighting for our interview. Now, if you guys want to know more about documentary filmmaking, my team and I have been putting together a course that walks you through every single step of the filmmaking process, from ideation to final edit, and even taking you all the way through the process of pitching your documentaries to major streaming platforms. So if you guys are interested in that, join the email list. I'll leave a link down below or a link right here. You guys check that out. You'll be the first to be notified when this course drops. My goal for the lighting was to make it feel very natural, like most of the lighting was coming through the windows behind her and wrapping around the entire room. Now, to properly expose for the window light outside, we had to use 6 stops of ND filter. And as you guys can tell, with all the lights turned off, our subject is very dark and underexposed. And because it was kind of a gloomy day, the rest of the house was pretty dark as well. The first step to lighting this interview was to figure out where we were going to place our key light. Like I said before, I wanted the lighting to feel very natural. So what we did was we took our key light and we placed it on the right side of our subject, trying to mimic that lighting coming in from the back windows. Now for our key light, we are using a GVM 650B, which is an extremely powerful bicolored light that we set to 5600 Kelvin in an attempt to match the daylight coming in from outside. Now, the reason why I always suggest to filmmakers that they should always have at least one really strong, powerful light like the 650B is because when you're in a situation where you're battling the outside light and the sun and things that you really can't control, you need something very, very powerful to compensate for the ND filter that we put on our camera. And because everything in the room is very dark, including our subject, now we need to take the GVM and increase the intensity all the way up to 60%. Now, if you had something like a 120D from aperture or even a 300, that might not be powerful enough to properly expose your image or your subject. Now, with our key light turned on, this is what it looks like. As you guys can see, the rest of the room is still pretty dark, but we were able to bring up the exposure on our subject. We then added an aperture 120D and placed it behind the right side of our subject and set that to 80% intensity. And this is what it looked like. Now, the overall ambience in the room was still a little bit too dark, and our key light was starting to feel a little bit sourcey and fake. So what we did was we added a field 125B and a 225B, and we just shot them straight up towards the ceiling in an attempt to bring up the overall exposure levels of the room. And this is what it looked like. We then brought in a negative fill to the left side of our subject in order to create a little bit more depth and shadow on the left side of her face. And this is what it looked like. Now, we knew that we weren't going to be able to control the lighting outside and the sun was going to gradually change throughout the day. That would affect everything that you would see on the inside of the room. We wanted to make sure that we controlled that lighting as much as possible. Now, by adding these 2 lights and shooting them up at the ceiling, we're able to lower and increase the intensity as the sun is moving. And as you see throughout the interview, you can't really notice that much of a change and a difference. And that's exactly why we added these 2 additional lights. The only negative to adding these 2 lights was it got a little bit hard to add depth and shadow to the left side of our subject's face because there was a lot of light spilling in from every direction. So by adding that negative fill was extremely important. And I wish we could have actually got it in a little bit closer, but unfortunately it would have been in frame. And before we started this interview, I knew that there was a trade-off that I had to choose, either control the lighting in the room or create a little bit more depth on our character's face. And I thought I would be able to create that in post rather than not being able to control the lighting in the room. Now for audio, a really important tip is try your best to record it on 2 different audio sources. For example, I'll use a shotgun mic going directly into my camera, and then I'll take a lav mic and use that on an external recorder and hook that up to a Zoom or a Tascam. That way, just in case anything fails between these 2 audio recordings, I have a backup and redundancy. For the shotgun mic, a good rule of thumb is to place it as close to your subject as possible without being in frame. I try to be about 3 to 5 feet away max, and then I aim the shotgun mic towards my subject's mouth so I capture the best possible audio recording. And the last thing that I do is I check my subject's eye line, and what I'll do is I'll take my fist and I'll say, hey, look at this point right here, look at this point here, look at this point here. And while she's doing that, I'll be looking at the camera and make sure that I find the right spot that feels the most natural. And then once I have that spot, I'm actually ready to start conducting my interview. The last tip that I'm going to give you guys is make sure that you have your interview questions prepared before you get into the interview. It's extremely important to be able to have a good idea of where you want the story to go, because those interview questions are really the vehicle to getting there. So take your time and make sure that you prepare interview questions that are really going to help you get the answers that you need to tell your story. The other thing that I would say is make sure that your subjects feel as comfortable as possible. And what I like to do is I try to have a conversation before we jump in front of the lights, in front of the camera, and I just start asking them like how their day is going, what they did, what they ate for breakfast, how did they get there, what kind of car they have. Just a simple conversation to get their mind off of, I got to get in front of this camera right now, in front of all these lights, in front of all these people. I better say something important. You know, so do your absolute best to make them feel as comfortable as possible, and also try to make this feel like a safe environment for them to be able to have a deep conversation. Make sure your crew members are being professional and serious, and make sure nobody's laughing or making them feel uncomfortable or unimportant. It's very important that you make them feel that they are the most important thing in the room. And like I said before, guys, we are in the process of creating this documentary course. And if you guys want to find out more about that, I'll leave a link down below. You guys can join the email list and be notified as soon as this course comes out. My name is Alex Arfadi. I'd like to thank you guys so much for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you guys in the next one.
Okay, folks, thank you to Alex Zapati. And yeah, we are just coming to the end of our show, of our lesson. Yeah. Before we wrap up, remember we have put emphasis on the opening moments of the documentary, and also the closing shots or the closing moment. The opening moments are very important in a documentary, because that's the moment that says to the audience, sit down and watch the entire movie. You must have that kind of moment that will keep the audience glued to the screen, so that they watch the film from start to finish. And in the end, you need to give them something that they can take away. And very ending, a good ending, the good shots that will give them an everlasting memory that will burn into their mind and forever, and give them a takeaway, something to take away that says, wow, that was amazing. See, it's something that will stick into their mind forever, and something that will want to make them want to watch the film over and over again, and hence tell their friends or whoever, their family members, about the documentary, because the subject or the topic was so well executed. So to well execute the content, because we said before, it's not about the idea, is about how the idea is executed. You may have the great idea, one of the greatest ideas, but if that idea is not well executed, it fails. It fails dismally. So to have your idea well executed, we are going in our next lesson. We will also go to the 3 elements that you need to take into consideration when you're doing a documentary. It will be the content. What is your documentary about? What about that person you want to tell us? And also, secondly, it is the context. Say, the environment, the world of the documentary. How does it fit in to the context? How did the context and the content come together and marry and move together to give us a great story? And the third level of a documentary, that will be the biggest takeaway, and it is the biggest element that will keep the audience glued into their screen and rooted in their seats and never want to move, is the emotional resonance of your documentary. You don't tell your audience what to think, you drive them into thinking, you evoke emotion, you evoke thoughts and memories and whatever. So it's the emotional resonance which is in the third level, and that must be your last shot. Okay, thank you, folks. Yeah, if anything that you need during your planning of the documentary, I'm always here to help you. Yeah, do give me a shout, and I also urge you to be present at all times in your lectures, so we can catch up, and then we can have like demonstrate of some of the things that I'm talking about. Rather than me talking to you and also playing videos, this industry is about doing. It's practical. So we need to come in as regularly as we possibly can, and also ask questions, and also do our homework as well. Yeah, study our textbooks. Okay, and practice our gear, our camera, and lighting, and etc. etc. Okay, that's it for now from me. All the best is work hard. Ask me questions if you get stuck. I'm always here to help you. Okay. Break a lens. Adios.